So welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and my topic today is worry. I'm picking up from the theme from last Friday's video when I talked about the coronavirus and I talked about probabilities, including the probability of dying if you get the coronavirus and the probability of getting it in the first place. And I said that I don't worry about those things. And that may seem a little confusing because they are things that are pretty bad. Well, yes, I can say that I am concerned about contracting the virus, and I'm concerned about mitigation of the virus in my environment. But that's different from worrying. If I'm concerned, that means I'm going to take it seriously and I'm going to do something about it. What I am not going to do is lie in bed at night or sit at my desk staring into space and just worrying, because that is doing nothing. That is just wasting emotional energy as opposed to doing something. So that's my topic for today, is how we can avoid worrying while still being concerned. So you probably all know Bob Marley's famous reggae hit, "Don't Worry, Be Happy." And I used to love that song too, and I like its message in part, but only in part. Obviously Marley is saying, there's a lot of things that happen in the world, but don't worry, just be happy. Well, that can get you into sticky situations if you're not careful. That is, if you don't have concerns about the future. If you just say, okay, I'm going to go off and smoke some weed in the park and I'm not going to worry, I'm just going to be happy. Well, then bad things may happen if you haven't made preparations for the future and for things that are coming down the pike, and you just don't worry, you're happy. Well, then you may end up with disaster. That's from experience true. But I also have to tell you that I used to worry a lot. Family trait. My father worried, not a lot, but he worried. My mother was a terrible worrier. She used to sit and worry about everything. And for decades, I was the same way. I would worry about things that might happen, that could happen, that will happen. And it's completely wasted effort, completely wasted emotion. So, rather strangely, about 3 Easters ago, I'm not sure exactly when, but it was about 3 years ago, when I had to decide what to give up for Lent. Now, as a Presbyterian, I don't have to give up anything. It's not part of our doctrine. In fact, Lent isn't even really part of our doctrine in general. But it seems to me sensible to prepare for Easter in a lot of ways, and Lenten disciplines have their benefits. And I've given up many things during Lent over the years, and 3 years ago or so, I decided to give up worrying. And I did. I found that every time I was inclined to worry about something, I would do what I call change the channel. That is, I would stop thinking about the thing that I was worrying about and think about something else. I call it changing the channel in those days. I've sometimes more recently called it reframing or refocusing. What I'm really trying to say is that worry is a thought process as much as anything else, and you can change your thoughts. It's not correct to say that you cannot change your emotional habits. You can, but it takes effort and practice. Now, I'm reminded of a meme that I really like, and I have it somewhere in my files. And it's a very simple flowchart. It starts off with the question, is there something on your mind that can worry you? Yes or no? Well, no, well then don't worry. But yes, then it splits into two questions. Can you do something about this thing you're worried about? Yes. Okay. Do that thing. And don't worry. If the answer is no, you can't do anything, then don't worry. I mean, it's a very simple equation. That if there's something that is impending or about to happen or you're concerned about, if you can do something about it, then do it. And if you can't do anything about it, then there's no sense in worrying, because it's going to happen anyway. And here's the thing about things that are going to happen anyway. If you have experience in the world, get to be my age, you realize that a lot of things that are inevitable, that are going to happen and you can't do anything about, aren't always what you picture them to be. I mean, first of all, there are some things that seem to be inevitable. Turns out they're not, and they don't happen. And so all of your worrying was completely wasted. Sometimes things are going to happen, but when they do happen, they're not nearly as bad as you had anticipated for one reason or another. So in that case also, your worrying was wasted energy. So this is my, ultimate solution these days. And it was part of the process of learning not to worry, is learning to face up to what is going to happen. Now that was my biggest problem years ago. I would have a particular problem that I knew was coming down the pike, and I would try to dismiss it or ignore it or forget it or whatever. And that is also wasted energy of a different sort. That what I do now is when I'm approaching a problem such as the coronavirus, for example, so I ask myself, what can I do? And I do it. Now, if you have something that you're worrying about and you do something about it, it has two repercussions. One of them is that it distracts you from worrying. That if you're doing something about what you're worried about, you're too busy to worry. You're doing something. but also it makes you feel better. If you're doing something, it makes you feel productive. And that also helps to get rid of worry. So that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation concerns what you do when there is nothing that can be done to mitigate the thing that seems to be coming down the pike that you could worry about. What do you do instead of worrying? Well, I think there are several options, but the most useful for me anyway is to think about something else, to refuse to dwell on the possibility of some kind of disaster or catastrophe happening in the future, because it's not happening now. And this leads back to my point that I made last time, that we often dwell in the past or in the future when we ought to be dwelling in the present. Now, if something is going to happen in the future and there's nothing we can do about it, then worrying is bringing that future, which has not happened and quite possibly won't happen, or won't happen in the way that you worry it will happen. You're bringing that future into your present. Whereas instead, you should be concerned about what the present is bringing you or giving you. And there are a lot of opportunities. So if I have something looming, I will get the pots and pans out and do some cooking, go for a walk, read a book, do some writing, do something productive to balance or mitigate the thing that is happening in the future that I might be concerned about, but I can't do anything about it. If you cannot do anything about something, worrying does not help. I'm here to tell you that worrying is a burden, that's all. It just makes things worse. But here's my final thought, going back to an initial idea I had earlier in this discussion. And that is that we can practice changing our emotions, and that's really important. That emotions tend to be habits. We get in the habit of being angry at something. We get in the habit of worrying about something. And we can get out of the habit, but it takes practice and it takes thought. You have to look at your condition, look at your circumstances, and evaluate them clearly, and then make decisions about what to do. So I guess I'm suggesting that rational thought will triumph over raw emotion. Sounding a little bit like a preacher, I guess. But I'm talking from experience. I'm saying that this has helped me. I have turned a corner by paying more attention to rational thought than to emotion. Now, I'm not Mr. Spock. I'm not some fictional character who puts rational thought over emotion and that's the end to it. I don't. There are a lot of areas where my emotions still run pretty strongly. But the thing is that those are emotions that I like. Emotions like love, for example. I'm very happy with the emotion of love. I've also practiced that emotion a lot in various ways as well. But the thing is that I'm okay with allowing that emotion to supersede some elements of rational thought. I'm not Mr. Spock in that respect. But I am Mr. Spock in the ways in which I approach things that I could worry about. I'm concerned about them, but I treat them rationally, and I have practiced it. I've practiced it ever since that fateful Lent when I said I'm going to give up worrying for Lent. Well, I didn't just give it up for Lent that year. I gave it up completely. And I don't know whether anyone will think that I'm not telling the truth, but I don't worry about anything now. I don't find it useful, and I prefer to do something rather than worry. So I will continue this discussion, of course, next Friday. And meanwhile, tell your friends, like and subscribe, and I will do something not chicken next Tuesday. That chicken has been with me for almost 2 weeks now, and I've still got some dishes frozen in the freezer, so it's going to be with me for a long time. But I promise that it will not be chicken on Tuesday.